Shinnecock Hills doesn't just test golfers, it breaks them, and the people responsible for setting it up have already proven they can't always stop that from happening. With the 2026 US Open days away, something is happening that almost never happens in professional golf. Scottie Scheffler, the world's #1, a man whose public composure is as much a weapon as his swing, has started talking, not carefully, not with the diplomatic softness players use when they want to avoid making enemies. Directly, specifically, in a way that has the entire golf world leaning forward before a single competitive shot has been struck. What he's pointing at is the setup waiting on that course this week. What he said about it is the kind of thing players simply don't say out loud, and the fact that he said it anyway tells you exactly how serious this situation has become. The USGA runs the US Open. The PGA Tour sends its best players to compete in it. Those two organizations are supposed to be working toward the same goal, producing the greatest golf tournament in the world. But when the course becomes the enemy, when conditions spiral beyond control, when the setup turns a championship into a chaos lottery, those two bodies stop pulling in the same direction. One is embarrassed. The other loses its biggest stars to unfair conditions, and the friction between them becomes impossible to ignore. Shinnecock Hills is where that friction catches fire. What Scheffler said this week is the spark. Personally, I think when the world's #1 breaks the unwritten rule and calls out the setup publicly, something is genuinely wrong. Agree or disagree? Drop it below. Here's what makes Shinnecock different from every other venue on the major championship calendar. This course has already destroyed 2 US Opens, and the people who ran them had to stand up afterward and admit it publicly. Not media pressure, not fan outrage forcing an apology, voluntary admission from inside the organization itself. John Bodenhamer, the USGA's chief championships officer, said plainly that with truth serum, nobody inside that organization would honestly claim the 2004 or 2018 Opens lived up to their own standards. 2 visits to this specific course, 2 failures by their own measure. That confession matters because it confirms what Scheffler is pointing at isn't opinion, it's documented. Institutional failure at the highest level of the sport. What made 2018 so damaging wasn't simply the difficulty level. Conditions spiraled so far beyond control that Phil Mickelson deliberately struck a moving ball on the green to stop it rolling further away. Not a mental error, a calculated decision made because the alternative felt worse. Zach Johnson stood on that same course and said they hadn't just reached the edge of acceptable difficulty, they had gone past it entirely. Behind all of this sits something specific to Shinnecock that planning alone cannot fix. The course sits exposed to Atlantic Ocean air in a way almost no other major venue does. On a calm morning, conditions feel manageable. Then the wind shifts, humidity drops, and within hours greens that played firm become genuinely unplayable, a condition called wilt that this course develops faster than virtually anywhere else on tour. That is the course Scheffler is walking into. But what makes 2026 different from every previous year isn't just the conditions. It's what he's walking in to chase. 4 major championships exist in professional golf. Winning all 4 is the career Grand Slam. Only 5 players in the history of the sport have completed it. Gene Sarazen, Ben Hogan, Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, and Tiger Woods. 5 names across more than a century of professional golf. Scottie Scheffler has won 3. The Masters, the Open Championship, the PGA Championship. 3 of the 4 now belong to him. The US Open is the only missing piece, and Shinnecock Hills is where he has to go get it. That single fact reframes everything happening this week. Scheffler isn't chasing ranking points or prize money. He is standing at the entrance of something almost no human being has ever walked through. And the door is located at a venue with a documented history of collapsing under its own conditions. Consider what that combination actually means. The greatest player alive in the form of his career, with history in his hands, walking into a course that has twice embarrassed the organization running it, where conditions can turn hostile within hours, and there is no remedy once they do. There is no backup plan at Shinnecock. There is no way to unwind a morning where the greens go past the point of fair competition. This isn't a US Open preview. This is either the week Scheffler joins 5 of the most legendary names in golf history, or the week a course with a documented pattern of failure steals that moment from him before he ever has a real chance to claim it. History this rare doesn't offer second chances. If Shinnecock takes this moment the same way it took the 2018 tournament from every player on that leaderboard, that isn't a bad week for Scheffler. That is a permanent scar on the sport itself. Rory McIlroy walked these greens earlier this week and measured speeds at just over 11 on the Stimpmeter. His assessment was specific and careful. Keep them at that speed, get them firm, and the USGA can place pins where they want without the chaos that destroyed pre-V US Openness here. That is not optimism. That is a conditional dressed as calm. A precise warning about exactly how narrow the margin is between a memorable US Open and another Shinnecock catastrophe. The USGA has made visible changes. Fairway widths average 48 yards this year, up from 42 in 2018 and dramatically wider than the 32-yard corridors at Oakmont last year. Bodenhamer described their philosophy as letting Shinnecock be Shinnecock. On paper, that sounds like wisdom, respecting the course rather than fighting it. In practice, it means handing atmospheric control to the most weather-exposed venue in major championship golf and trusting the ocean to cooperate. The PGA Tour's best players, the men the tour depends on for its identity, its television ratings, its relevance in the ongoing battle against LIV golf, are being sent into conditions that have twice proven uncontrollable. When those players get hurt by an unfair setup, the tour absorbs the damage while the USGA moves on to next year's venue. That institutional gap, the USGA controlling conditions, the PGA Tour carrying the consequences, is exactly the tension Scheffler stepped into when he decided to speak this week. Every player in that field understands the gap. Most stay silent. Scheffler didn't. And what he said is why this week feels different from anything that came before it. Most players arrive at a major venue and choose diplomacy. Praise the setup, respect the process, stay quiet. It is the unwritten rule. You don't publicly challenge the people running your most important tournaments before those tournaments begin. Scheffler broke that rule. His words weren't angry. No eruption, no social media post fired in frustration. He sat down, spoke calmly, and said exactly what he saw. He said the target areas on this course are extremely small, that the greens, when firm, play even smaller than they appear, that Shinnecock looks generous with space until you understand how little of that space actually matters, and that the USGA, in chasing the hardest test in golf, consistently pushes the boundary of what fair competition actually means. Then he added the line that landed hardest. Running one tournament per year on a different course every year makes it genuinely difficult to get the setup right. The US Open always pushes the limits. At Shinnecock, those limits are already closer to the edge than anywhere else he plays. This is not a frustrated player venting after a bad round. This is the world's best player before the tournament begins, calmly and deliberately telling anyone willing to listen that the organization responsible for protecting his historic moment may not have this course under control. The pattern makes it impossible to dismiss as noise. At the PGA Championship at Aronimink earlier this season, Scheffler called certain pin positions the most absurd he had seen in 7 years on tour. That was framed as post-round frustration. What he's doing now is different, measured, pre-tournament, and aimed directly at a venue with receipts. When the most composed player in the world says absurd at one major and then delivers a pre-tournament warning at the next, that stops being frustration. That is a verdict on the people running the sport. The stakes sitting underneath all of this go beyond Scheffler's Grand Slam. The PGA Tour has spent 2 years fighting for relevance against LIV golf, losing stars, losing narrative control, watching its identity erode in real time. The US Open at Shinnecock was supposed to be the counter-argument, the moment that reminds the global sports audience why no rival league, no guaranteed money, no alternative format can manufacture what a real major championship produces. If Shinnecock implodes again, if the setup collapses, if conditions spiral, if the week is remembered for chaos rather than competition, the damage doesn't stay inside the ropes, it becomes evidence. Ammunition for every argument that golf's traditional establishment cannot run its own product, that the PGA Tour cannot protect its best players, that the USGA cannot control its most famous venue, Scheffler standing at the door of history and being denied it by an unplayable green, that image does not fade. It becomes the symbol of everything critics have been saying about how this sport is being managed. 2 opens already failed here. The USGA admitted it. McIlroy is watching the greens with careful eyes. Every player in the field carries the memory of what this place becomes when conditions turn. Scheffler sees all of it. He said it out loud. The question now is whether anyone in charge was actually listening. Watching him this close to something only 5 players have ever done, stepping into a course with this history, I think this is the most consequential week professional golf has seen in years. If you believe Scheffler gets through Shinnecock and completes the Grand Slam, say it below. If you think this course takes it from him, say that too. Subscribe and stay close, because however this week unfolds, this story is not over.